Gab, of course. Gab, by the way, is in Monaco at the moment, ahead of the Champions League draw. Say again?
With all the big timers.
Big time, yeah, Gab's a big timer, isn't he? They wouldn't let Mark Ogden go there.
He's miserable, that's why.
So, Gab, obviously Lukaku coming in to replace Osimhen, whose future is still very much up in the air. Saudi Arabia seems to be the latest destination he's been linked to.
Well, the latest and the oldest, because as you may remember, Osimhen's contract was due to expire at the end of last season. He signed a 1-year extension with a release clause, but actually 2 release clauses, one for Europe, one for Saudi Arabia, which was much higher. I think the club have been trying to get him out the door to Saudi Arabia all summer long. But thus far, he said, I'm not really interested. There's been talk now of Al Ahly being potentially interested, trying to talk to his people. He's made it very clear he wants to stay in Europe. Now, will that still hold after August 30th when the window closes? And, of course, the Saudi window stays open until October 7th. We'll see. But I think for now, he's trying to do his best to, if he has to go, get a move in Europe.
Gab, why are Napoli so desperate to get rid of him?
Well, I think they can. So, if I were to be mean, I would say so that way they can afford Lukaku. No, I won't go there. No, look, Antonio Conte kind of assumed that Osimhen was leaving. The whole club assumed that Osimhen was leaving. He only signed a 1-year extension and got a big bump because I think he thought he was leaving. He thought clubs would come in for him. Probably a lot less than that 120 million euro release clause, but still. And then it hasn't happened, and Napoli need to move him on, not just for Lukaku, but obviously they've bought other players that are still pursuing, McTominay and Billy Gilmore, among others. So, Napoli simply aren't in a position where they can afford both. And between the two, extending Osimhen's contract further, he makes a ton of money. That would have been a huge financial commitment. Lukaku doesn't come cheap either in terms of wages. But obviously, it is less than Osimhen, and you can get that big fat fee for Osimhen, which obviously you can't do for Lukaku.
Where do we stand on Osimhen and Chelsea, Gab?
This is a weird one. I mean, this is a drum that keeps getting beaten from Italy. Chelsea going from Osimhen. There's also talk of, Chelsea need a striker. It's either going to be Osimhen or Ivan Toney. I don't know. I mean, unless Boli and Ibali, found a bunch of money under the sofa to go and balance this out and satisfy PSR, or somebody comes along and offers them $300 million for Ben Chilwell. I don't quite know how they're going to manage this. Could there be a scenario where maybe he comes on loan or something, or maybe given they even though the Lukaku deal is done, they somehow retroactively make this part of the Lukaku package. I genuinely don't know. Obviously, Chelsea have added, Mark Yu. They have obviously Nico Jackson is the center forward. I think if I were Nico Jackson and Osimhen were to materialize, I'd kind of be saying WTF here. It's one of those situations where I wonder if Chelsea aren't being perhaps used a little bit. Paris Saint-Germain was a team that they were linked with. Everybody's saying now that Paris Saint-Germain, they seem fine with the team they have. I wonder if maybe they could come back into the mix in these last 48 hours of the transfer window, because Paris Saint-Germain is a team that Osimhen would very happily play for.
The transfer window, of course, closes on Friday. Am I right, guys? Friday in Europe and different dates Saudi Arabia. Does that have any relevance to this?
Yeah, like I said earlier, Saudi Arabia, I believe, is October 7th. They still have time for there's such a gaggle of players who either clubs still want to move or who are free agents. Obviously, free agents can sign any time. But yeah, you still have that difference between Europe and Saudi. Although Saudi, as we've seen this year, they've been a lot more sensible with their and cautious with their spending relative to last season.
Osimhen, of course, not the only striker that's been linked to a move to Saudi Arabia, and indeed Chelsea. You mentioned him. Where are we on Ivan Toney?
It's amazing because the price tag keeps falling. Right now, people are talking 35 million.
Wow.
I like again. It's a similar thing. If you're Chelsea and you've embarked on this plan of very young players on low wages, relatively low wages, if this is your business model, where does Toney fit? I don't think he does at all. Brentford have been shopping around really everywhere. It's been going on all summer. Obviously, he hasn't, he's been training, but he hasn't been playing with the first team. He's also been linked to Saudi, like everybody else. It's a tough situation for him, and I think for Brentford as well, because they were banking on that money.
You make it all, Craig?
Not a lot.
No.
In what sense?
It just from whatever sense you want to take it from. Do you want to take it from a player's perspective, from a Chelsea perspective?
I would sincerely hope those two players mentioned don't venture to Saudi Arabia. I think it'd just be a huge waste. And I think, as Gab said, Osimhen is fighting, certainly from his perspective, to be at a top club in Europe. That's obviously maybe not going to help Napoli as much, but from a player's perspective. And Chelsea Chelsea, again, the financial side apart, Chelsea need a striker. Nico Jackson did a very good job at the weekend, but can he do that consistently? So, again, with these transfer windows, it's so frustrating, isn't it? Season starts, managers try to work the squad, and Brentford don't know if they're going to have a player or not. Chelsea don't know if they're getting a striker in. Osimhen's out of the window at Napoli. They've brought Lukaku in. He doesn't know where he's going. It just leaves everybody up in the air. It is a very frustrating system around this time of the year, in my opinion.
Even Toney must be wondering what's going on.
Why are you whispering?
Wasn't he about 80 million to Arsenal last year?
I didn't mean to whisper.
Wasn't he double that to Arsenal last year?
Yep. Yeah, he was.
Double that.
Yeah.
Do you
In
think
the January transfer
Brentford
window.
were asking?
Here's the only thing I can come up with. Do you think that it's the way that Brentford play that are putting teams off Ivan Toney? Because in terms of output, there's no question he's proven he can score goals in the Premier League. But the way that Brentford play, plenty of early balls forward, high balls in the box. Nobody else plays like Brentford.
Right.
So the only thing I can think of is your Arsenals, your Chelseas, or all the other supposed top teams think he just doesn't fit into how they go about it. Because it can't be anything else. When you've got the record of scoring goals in the Premier League that he has, you would think somebody would be. And 35 million as well. So it doesn't really add up, but that's all I can come up with.
Away from strikers, Gab, let's talk about a couple that could be leaving Chelsea, Sterling and Chilwell. Both to Manchester United?
That's been mooted, but then our reporting at ESPN suggests that United not really big on them. Again, these are players that you see the wages there. These are enormous wages. These were signed. These are players whose new contracts were done sort of before Chelsea embarked on this new sort of campaign of young players and lower wages back in January 2023. So they don't really fit. I don't really see that happening, frankly, either one, because obviously, certainly with Chilwell, at United, Shaw will be back one day, theoretically, maybe Malacia too, and you've got Diogo Dalla as well. Raheem Sterling, I think, would be an interesting one, but if anything, United seem to have a glut of wingers, including, a former England international of their own, who they're trying to shift in Jadon Sancho.
Indeed, we'll talk about Sancho in a moment.
It's a competition to see who gets the worst wide player. or the most expensive of the worst wide players.
Those wages are incredible,
they're not
aren't
the worst wide players, but we're talking about some of the most expensively paid players who are underperforming. Certainly Jadon Sancho.
If United, do you push for any of those two?
No, absolutely not. I think United do have a problem at left back. I think there is a big concern about Luke Shaw, the amount of injuries he continues to pick up. Malacia has been injured as well. Obviously, Diogo Dallo can play either fullback now that Mazraoui's there. But I do think there is a big concern about Luke Shaw's ability to stay fit. I think if he's fit, obviously, clearly he's a very strong player. But he just seems to have a continuation of a problem after a problem after a problem. And I really don't see where getting Jadon Sancho out the door to Chelsea in a swap and then bringing in another I'm not going to say problematic player, but inconsistent player. I just don't see how, as a long-term strategy with this new United hierarchy, how that sort of fits into looking to the future.
Neither of them should be going anywhere near United.
Right.
You know, all the things Craig's talking about Luke Shaw, you can point a finger at Chilwell.
Yep.
So you've already got a problem there. Why'd you bring another one in? And the only way Raheem Sterling is playing football after this window's closed is if he really loves the game and wants to take a huge pay cut. Because nobody's paying him 325 grand a week. And we will find out after a couple of months whether he's bothered about playing football really, or whether he's just going to take the money. That's what's going to happen.
Speaking about being bothered, meanwhile, Chiesa has been confirmed at Liverpool. Stevie, are you bothered by this?
Not for 13 million, I'm not. I mean, 13 million is a drop in the ocean, isn't it?
These days.
And so to get a guy of 26 years of age, with his experience, with the potential of him being able to get back to somewhat near his best, it kind of seems a little bit of a no-brainer. You know, he's not coming in and expecting, he's certainly not coming in expecting to play. The club's not bringing him in and thinking he's going to play tomorrow. And if you've got Salah leaving the end of the season, which he probably seemed like he's going to be doing, if you can get Chiesa back to anywhere near his best, then until you bring a superstar in, if you're going to do that, then maybe you can fit Chiesa in. So for 13 million, it's an absolute no-brainer.
So it makes sense for Liverpool, but does it make sense for Chiesa, Gab? Because surely you want to go somewhere where you're going to start.
Or where the guy who starts ahead of you is, you know, in his 30s and in the final year of his contract and is making an absolute mint, and, you know, we'll have a big decision to make. I think Chiesa's betting on himself. First of all, Chiesa is more versatile than just a right winger. I agree with you in the sense that, you know, why Liverpool when Liverpool already have a ton of sort of wide forward and winger types, and Jota and Nunez and Diaz and Gakpo and Harvey Elliott, and there they all are. You know, there's a lot of options. So, like, why would you be going in there? He doesn't fear the competition. You know, he wants to play at a high level. I think he also knows realistically that part of the reason Juve are letting him go is he's got a year left on his deal. He makes a lot of money at Juventus, and, you know, in excess of £200,000 a week, and he knows that his new deal, were he to stay at Juve, assuming they would give him one, and they certainly don't look like they want to do that, would be substantially less. Well, if I go to Liverpool, I don't know the terms of these deals, but if I go to Liverpool and I do well, I'm playing on the biggest stage of the world, one of the biggest clubs in the world, and I can get a new contract and I can make that money that, you know, I think perhaps I deserve. Although, like I said, I don't think it's about the money why he's moving. He's somebody who's always had a ton of self-belief, and he looks at this and he says, you know, I can't be scared of the competition. You know, if I'm scared of the competition, I shouldn't be here. And personally, I think, you know, other than Salah, none of these other guys are people who, you know, Chiesa should legitimately fear as saying, well, they're just another dimension from me.
This is a player who really should be in the 50 million plus category. But because of the contract, because of the injuries, so forth, then this is a deal that I think, like Stevie, is like, why wouldn't you? You're nowhere near overpaying for a player. As long as he's fit and available, which he hasn't been, and that's been a problem. Mm-hmm. But maybe he needs a fresh start. Maybe he needs to get away. Different country, different team, new teammates, and breathe some life into this second part of his career. And as Gab said, he covers, and they've got a few of these players that cover 2 or 3 positions in the front. And that just gives you options, but quality options. If he comes in and he's injured 80% of the time, it's going to be a waste. It's going to be a waste. But you're not shelling out millions and millions and millions and taking a huge risk. There is always some risk, there is wages, and there is a smallish in today's money transfer fee. But if you were sitting saying, a couple 2 or 3 years ago, you're going to get Federico Chiesa for between 10 and 15 million, people would have laughed at you. Absolutely, he was a regular international footballer playing at the highest level. Thinking back to the European Championships, which they won in 2021. So a lot of it is going to come down to the player and the fitness, but you have to look at Liverpool and say, all right, they're not going out shelling out for the big stars that are 100 million, but they're looking for those players that can come in and make a difference and maybe rejuvenate their careers, and Chiesa for me falls into that category.
Are Liverpool done, Gab, now?
I mean, that seems to be the indication. I mean, Zubimendi, obviously there was that period when Real Sociedad kept him out of the side. Now he's back in the side. I think that's done. I think they like what Gravenberch has done in kind of his audition there in that kind of number 6 position. So I would imagine they'd be done. I think there's still some suggestion about Joe Gomez, and if he moves on, how do you replace him? I would assume Ben Doak would go out on loan somewhere. But I think overall, I think, they feel Chiesa gives them another option. And maybe it also gives them a bit of leverage over Mohamed Salah in terms of, were he to stay another season, on what terms would those be terms maybe more favourable to Liverpool?
Are you concerned, Stevie, if in fact they are done?
I don't know whether concern's the right word. I think it's clear the fact that they went for Zubimendi. That's the position they were looking to fill.
Yes, and they haven't.
And I don't know whether it's a kind of a false dawn that Gravenberch, who for me has done nothing since he's come to the club, has had a couple of decent games.
Ipswich, Brentford.
But it's Ipswich and Brentford, and that's the problem. Because if they're taking a chance on that, that's where they could slip up between now and the next transfer window. But again, it's one of those situations. Do you want Liverpool, or do I want Liverpool to go out and just get players?
Right,
or do I want to go and get proper players and get the best players and not just a load of bodies to have a big squad?
I think you'd only be concerned if you really felt Liverpool were viable in the title race.
Okay.
And I think that's a stretch.
Third place is basically their ceiling.
You're asking a new manager to come in. You've hardly spent any money. It's going to be a big ask to go with two sides that are already established and the coaches have been in there. And so, a bit like what Stevie's saying, why go up? I mean, maybe they will be. Maybe they can be consistent all the way and hang in there. I just don't think so. So why would you then go out and splash money and panic about it? If Arne Slot's the guy that's going to be in there for, 4 or 5, 6 years, whatever it is, there has to be a bit of patience about this to build it properly. And for those reasons, they probably won't do any business between now and the end of the transfer window. And I think they're going to have to be okay with that. It's going to be a slow building process for Liverpool, getting some out, getting some in. But a bit like Arsenal, when they were trying to get back these great Wenger years, they threw bad money after bad money until they realised it wasn't the way forward. They had to get the bad apples out, the big earners out. They built a little bit slower with younger players, not so high profile. Obviously, Declan Rice and one or two others are. But they brought in some lower profile players and they've built, and I think Liverpool need to do the same. So
quiet window then for Liverpool. The same can't be said though of Juventus, who've been extremely busy this summer. Of course, new coach, plenty of ins and outs as well. They've started the season well. They've got 2 wins out of 2 so far this campaign. And could there be another name added to that arrival, Gab? Where are we on Jadon Sancho?
Yeah, they keep getting linked to Sancho and Sterling. I'm really skeptical unless it's some kind of loan deal where the loaning club pays most of the wages. I think they're okay now, actually, in terms of where the squad is. I mean, sure, you always want more options, but they've committed to going with younger players. They've committed with this way of playing. I think they're a lot stronger in midfield with Thuram, Douglas Luiz, and now Koopmeiners. That's a whole new midfield, and they still have, Locatelli and Fagioli, who, may not be a couple of Brian Robsons, but they're pretty darn good midfielders. They're Italian international, so I think they have the depth there. And on paper, they're saying, well, we wouldn't mind maybe winning the cup and finishing second or third, but the way this team is coming together and the fact that Motta's sort of shock therapy in terms of style of play, in terms of approach thus far, and we're only 2 games in, seems to be working. I think maybe they're secretly wondering if maybe they can't, turn this into a 2-horse race for the title or even a 3-horse race.
Gab, what's going to happen to the Gab and Jules podcast tomorrow? Because you're in Monaco. Goodness knows where Jules is. What's going on?
Well, Jules is on holiday, but as you know, the Jules never sleeps. He's already been in touch with me. We will be taping the podcast remotely using this fancy technology that we have here. He's going to be on the beach in the Ile de Ré in the Channel, and I'll be here in Monte Carlo.
Wow, professionals, as always.
Stuck.